In the last video, we learned a little bit about packages and how there are a few different places that they can be stored in and a couple of different formats that they can be stored in as well. But what we did discuss are the contents of a package, the package resources, if you will. So, time for that. Hello, fellow Sublime Text fanatics. ODAT Nerd here. Today's video is about the different types of files that you might find inside of a package. And before we get started, I'd like to remind you that if you find these videos useful, please thumb them as appropriate. Subscribe to see more videos. If you have comments or questions about this video or suggestions for future videos, drop them in the comment section below or hit me on Twitter at ODAT Nerd. But to the point at hand, package resources. Now, we have a very small number of package resources set aside here just to look at. I want you to keep in mind, we're not going to talk too much about what each of these is particularly for. We're just sort of getting a sense of what they are. There are a few different other kinds of resource files, and future videos will cover each one of these types of files in depth and tell you how to use them in your package development. What we want to get here is a sense of what you can expect to find in a package, because one of the things you might want to do is modify a package or configure it or see how something's working, and being able to sort of dig around inside of it and sort of know what the files are for and what they're doing is a good way to do that. We should also point out that when we talk about package resources, what we really mean is any file that's stored in a package, because it is possible for any type of file to be stored in a package. For example, packages often have a README in them that provides documentation. So what we're going to find as we look through these resources that I have here, and I just sort of picked some of the more common ones, is that they generally fall into one of three different formats. The file might be JSON, it might be XML, or it might be a YAML file. Those are the three basic types. Now, when it comes to JSON files, if you're unfamiliar with the JSON format, there's a link down in the description to a page that talks about it in a little bit more detail. The important takeaway here is that the parsing of JSON in Sublime is a little more lax than the standard. As we can see here in this Sublime settings file, comments are allowed, and it also is more lenient about trailing commas on the last item of a list or the last key in a dictionary, where standard JSON would be very unhappy indeed. Now, again, just as samples of files that we might run into, this is a preferences.sublime settings. This is the default preferences for Sublime Text, and as we can see, it's a JSON file. I should also point out that I'm using the package dev package, which is providing enhanced syntax highlighting and a lot of other cool features. I'm going to do a video showcasing some of the things that are great about that in an upcoming video on the channel. But you're probably pretty familiar with the preferences Sublime settings file, because it's the one you use the most often to configure Sublime. Perhaps the second most common package resource is this one, which is the Sublime Key Map File, which provides key mappings for various commands. And of course, this is also a JSON file. Unlike a preferences file, this is a list of objects instead of a single object, because there are more than one key binding at any particular time. You may also be familiar with a Sublime build file, which, as we can see, is also a JSON file that is a JSON object, much like a Sublime settings file is. These are used to execute external programs. For example, this one is from the Python package and executes your Python program in an external interpreter, the Python interpreter. Perhaps a less known resource type for general users, but more known to people that are creating packages, is a Sublime menu file, which provides the menu commands and the main menu bar for the package, or for Sublime Text as a whole, I should say. This is the main menu from the default package. So this is the base menu, and other packages add on to this. You may also be familiar with the Sublime color scheme format, which is a JSON object that provides rules and colors to match scopes, which are defined in syntaxes to tell Sublime exactly how it should syntax highlight languages. Speaking of, this is an example of a Sublime syntax file. Now, This is the topic of probably an entire series of videos all on its own, but the important takeaway is it's a YAML file. It uses regular expressions and a stack of contexts and various magics to figure out what the different parts of your files are so that it can syntax highlight them. And you may also be familiar with a Sublime Snippet file, which I included here because unlike other files, it's an XML type file instead of the JSON file that we have seen or the YAML file that is a Sublime syntax file. And of course, there's the ever popular Python plugin type file. Now, again, this is not the be all and end all of all package resources, but you're going to find that most files are of a JSON format, either as a single object like a preferences file, or as a list of objects like a settings file, or sorry, as a key map or a menu. Similarly, some files are XML files, and this also includes TM language files, which are an XML version of syntax files from legacy versions of Sublime. Those work the same as a Sublime syntax file, but they're XML instead and a little bit harder on the eyes. A TM theme file, despite its name, is actually a color scheme, also in XML format, but it does the same thing as the Sublime color scheme file does. And of course, there's also Sublime theme files, which are literally themes that change the whole look of the application. Those are JSON as well. Now, what files a package contains is really up to that package itself. Some packages contain only plugins, some might contain only various syntaxes and maybe plugins to deal with those syntaxes. It's also possible for a package to contain only snippets or some combination thereof. And as I said at the beginning, it's also possible for packages to just have standard data files in them that aren't special to Sublime at all, but are something that the package itself needs. Now, the important takeaway from all of this is a package is just a collection of files. And if you want to look at any particular package file, you can go into the command palette and use this view package file command, which we saw in a previous video, which allows you to see every file in every package. Now here, for example, is a Sublime Macro file. And if we view that, we can see, yep, that's just a JSON file. It looks very similar to a key binding type thing. Perhaps it has a list of commands and arguments to run. And the last thing to say about this is that Sublime is, of course, sensitive to the format of these files. So if your macro doesn't have commas in the right place or it has too many commas, you end up with error messages from Sublime telling you that things have gone horribly wrong. But solving those is a job for the next video. And that's just a quick overview of what a package resource is. Remember, we didn't cover all of the possible types of package resources here, but they will all fall into the realm of JSON, XML, or YAML type files. And you can use the official or unofficial documentation to see more information about what the actual format of those files should look like. They'll also be the topic of future videos. To that end, if you have any questions on this video, suggestions for future videos, comment in the comments section below or hit me on Twitter at ODATNerd. Like and subscribe if you are into that sort of thing and you find these videos helpful. But the most important thing is to please have a sublime day.